And he was like, yo, you're going to turn pro. You're going to turn pro. And I was like, okay, whatever. On my right, I had Michael Lockett. And I'm just looking at this. And we're pumping up. And I look at Alexis. He smiles. Look at Michael Lockett's arm. I'm like, what am I doing here? I'm like, all right, whatever. And then, to top it off, John Meadows walks into the pump-up room. And it gets really quiet. And I'll never forget this. He goes to the corner, and I always loved John. He was a very big supporter when I was a teenager. He always helped me out as much as he could. And I remember he goes to pull down his pants, and he, like, kind of moons the whole room. And all you see is these hamstrings and glutes, and I'm like, I was really like, holy, what am I doing here? And at that point, I'm like, all right, I'll just go up there and do the best I could. And I was already, like, whatever, let's just have fun.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to Blood, Sweat, and Gear with coaches Skip Hill, Andrew Berry. I'm Scott McNally, and today we are joined by the one and only Dominic Cardone. What's up, brother? How you doing?
What's up, guys? Joining you for a second time, this time without connection issues, except I'm in the dark, but I'm here.
That's all right. You get the mood lighting going. We appreciate it. All of our programming is brought to you by TrueNutrition.com. You can use our code THINK for additional savings. If you're in the UK, you can check out STROM SPORTS Nutrition for some great health supplements and health stacks. If you're in Canada, go to supplementsource.ca. They've got great deals that change week to week. Thank you to everybody who's supporting the program through Patreon. And I'm looking forward to this. I mentioned before, this is our second try, guys. We tried doing this once. This time it's going to work. Everything looks good, sounds good. But I had already told Dom before, man, I've known who you are, like, literally since you were a kid. And you had a better physique than I ever have in my entire life, like, basically as a child, Thank you for joining us, man.
Thank you guys. Again, like I said before, thank you guys for having me on. I've been watching your guys' show and all your shows, Scott, for quite some time. And I haven't done a podcast in a while, so it's really good to be on yours.
Right on. So this episode, guys, I literally just got back into town, and I'm not prepared. So I'm just basically here to enjoy with everybody else. And Skip and Andrew are going to run this thing. So, guys, take it away. Where do we start?
I got you. I want to start from the beginning because I've been following you, Dom. Obviously, I mean, we're friends now, but I've been following you since I saw you win the Easterns in 2014. And I say this before, but on the East Coast, that's like a rite of passage show. There's Atlantic States, there's Eastern USA's. You're in front of Steve. Now you're in front of Steve and Tyler. The judging panel's great. It's in a great venue. And Dom happened to win that show. How old were you when you won that show? And even after that, can you tell us what got you into bodybuilding?
So when I won the Easterns 2014, that was 2 weeks before Nationals, I was 21. That year, I didn't even plan on doing Nationals, which I'll get into. I started bodybuilding when I was 15. I was playing football my whole life since I was a kid. I was going to my sophomore year of high school. And I actually told this story briefly on Professional Muscle the other day on the forum. I hop on there once in a while. And they the coaches opened up the door to the weight room and just said, have at it. And we had no idea what we were doing, but there was leg machines there. There was a leg extension. There was a leg press. Some kids were squatting. So my first ever workout was legs, and which happened to be my best body part. And I had no idea what I was doing, at least I thought. And the next day, for the next 2 days, I couldn't walk. I never worked out before. And my mom didn't like that because I couldn't walk to the point where I couldn't go to school. I didn't know what was going on. She thought there was something wrong with me. And so then I started researching how to put on muscle, how to get stronger. YouTube was just getting popular at the time. And then I seen videos of Jay Cutler and Ronnie Coleman. And that was it. I said I wasn't playing football anymore. And I competed in my first show when I was 16.
I couldn't find that history. Was that an NPC show or was that like a different organization?
Yeah, so that was the NPC at the I don't know if it still is. Excuse me. It was the Steve So Metropolitans 2010. I was 16. I won the teen class. I beat a 19-year-old in the overall. And I placed top 5 in the open light heavy, I believe, and novice light heavy. Did great that show. I was immediately hooked to competing. And it was actually an interview I did with backstage with Dave Palumbo, RX Muscle at the time. And I told him my goal was to do team nationals one day. Do you want to keep rambling on? Did you have another question, Andrew?
I remembered that interview, by the way. I remembered that, man. And then, by the time you were 21, you had like a legit physique at that point. You weren't like just a 21-year-old kid who got lucky. I just wanted to throw that in there.
Well, didn't you end up winning the teen nationals? in the process?
So 2000, that was 2010, 2011, I did the Easterns. I was 18 years old. I won the team class. I won the light heavyweight novice. I could have arguably won the novice over, and I placed 5th in the open light heavyweight. That was in Mike Yablon, Mark Rivera. There's a bunch of guys. It was a very big class. Did good that show, and then when I was 19, 2012, I did the team nationals. But at that show, I was 205, 206. I won the heavyweight class, but I lost the overall to Cody Montgomery.
That's right.
So
I remember that.
Yeah, so I did lose the overall team nationals, but I wasn't really that prep. I was working with Oscar Arden. I really learned the most I ever did about bodybuilding at that point. I was upset maybe for 5 minutes, and I was okay. On to the next goal. I was just happy to be there. And then the next time I competed, like you said, Andrew, was the Easterns, and then 2014 when I was 21, and then nationals 2 weeks later.
And we all know about the nationals when you showed up in that crazy condition. I remember talking to, I think it was Meadows and a few other people that saw you backstage, and they're like, "There's a kid here with just this most sunken in face, and we don't really know what he looks like," because you'd only had 3 or 4 or 5 maybe amateur shows at that point, so you weren't a household name, quote unquote. And I remember someone telling me I just knew that guy's going to be peeled when he peels it off, and sure enough, the guy's jaw, I can't remember if it was John or if it was someone, they're their jaw just dropped, saying, "Holy shit, this guy is in crazy condition." What was that prep like? And were you working with Oscar then?
What's funny is I was actually working with Chad Nichols for that prep.
Okay.
But what's funny is everybody talked about how crazy condition at that show. Yet I don't see it in the pictures.
Huh.
But I remember seeing John backstage. I was nervous as hell. I wasn't even going to do nationals, but Chad was like, "No, you should do it." I didn't want to do it until I was 25 or 26. I was like, "Okay, if you tell me to do it, I'll do it." And then I was backstage, and then I'll talk about the prep a bit. On my left, I had Alexis Rolone. We were following each other's prep on Facebook, and he was like, "Yo, you're going to turn pro. You're going to turn pro." And I was like, "Okay, whatever." On my right, I had Michael Lockett, and I'm just looking at this. And we're pumping up, and I look at Alexis. He smiles. Look at Michael Lockett's arm. I'm like, what am I doing here? I'm like, all right, whatever. And then, to top it off, John Meadows walks into the pump-up room, and it gets really quiet. And I'll never forget this. He goes to the corner, and I always loved John. He was a very big supporter when I was a teenager. He always helped me out as much as he could. And I remember he goes to pull down his pants, and he kind of moons the whole room. And all you see is these hamstrings and glutes, and I'm like, I was really holy, what am I doing here? And at that point, I'm like, all right, I'll just go up there and do the best I could. And I was already, whatever, let's just have fun.
Yeah.
And I wound up winning the class and getting my pro card that day, which was incredible. But the prep was, like I said, I had no intentions of doing nationals. It was just do Easterns, try to win Easterns, and then improve for a few years before I even think of going to nationals. But working with Chad that prep, it was all pretty damn basic, which was great, and it worked. I do think doing Easterns 2 weeks before Nationals worked in my favor because I came into Nationals 10 pounds heavier, and he was also there in person to see me carb up and stuff. Yeah. But yeah, I remember when I won the Easterns, he goes, "You should do Nationals." And I was like, okay, if you think so. And it worked out in my favor.
Well, for a 21-year-old kid too, that's a pretty big expense. Not to mention how intimidating it is to go to the nationals.
No kidding.
You're going down. Yeah, was it down in Miami then that year?
Yes. Yeah.
For a guy from the New York area, you're like, man, okay, I got to get a plane ticket. This is a big deal. I'm sure you were intimidated. Just I actually have to travel for a show for the first time. Was that a pretty big deal for you?
What's funny is actually when I won the Easterns, it was either right before or after I won the Easterns, GAT picked me up as an athlete. It wasn't a paid contract or anything, or at least they said not until I turned pro, but that's another story. But they covered all my fees for the show. Okay. So they were like, no, go ahead, do it. So I was like, okay, great. But for me traveling to the show, I wasn't really nervous at all. When I'm in any prep, and then we could even talk about my New York prep later on, no matter what prep I did, either it was when I worked with my dad doing concrete or when I was in high school, I always prepared for everything, So having to go to another state, I was like, okay, I have my food with me. What's the worst that could happen? I'm over-prepared. And whatever happens, happens, And that's another thing, too, is, even though I did get nervous backstage at Nationals, I always put in my mind at all my shows, I truly did whatever I could in all my preps. And whatever happened, happened. That's why I wasn't upset when I lost to Team National overall. Because I know training with Oscar, every session was as hard as it could be. I know I never cheated my diet. I never didn't do my cardio. So I was like, okay, maybe I'm just not good enough yet. But one day I will be. So going to Nationals, it was kind of like, all right, let's just see what happens. I went there ready to – I knew I would be at my best, but the rest was out of my control.
I got to ask you. I want to jump in really quick. Before we get too far, I wanted to ask what it was like training with Oscar Arden, because is that where you're going? Yeah, because I dreamed of training with Oscar. Now, did you train ever at his house in his home gym that he had set up? Dude, so I've heard stories that like the police had been called because they thought like a murder was going on in Oscar's house when they hear the screaming. His basement was out. Put it this way, man, when I put my home gym together in my basement, I thought about Oscar. Like, to me, that was a dream gym. He had all the cool equipment. It was all just stuffed down in there. You literally trained with him like you were a kid at the time in that gym. The same gym where like he had great pros at the time coming down too.
I have to say, Oscar is kind of we had a falling out, but
okay.
I hold nothing against him. Because if it wasn't for him coming into my life 8 weeks out from Team Nationals, maybe we wouldn't be here right now talking about, winning Nationals and stuff. That's how much he impacted me when I was a teenager. And yes, I did train at those houses. And yes, those stories were true. And that gym was maybe 3 times the size of my office, which isn't big at all. But you had everything in there. And we actually owned a gym together that never really got off the ground because of COVID. But we aimed to make a bigger version of his gym for our clients back in New York. This is years ago. When you walk into that gym, there was just a feeling about it. I mean, it was there since the 90s. You had Oliver Burke, Victor Martinez. I mean, the list goes on about the guys you had in there, Kai, the guys you had in there. So when you went in there, it was like time to get the business. And training with him, I don't think there's any coach, any trainer on this planet that will push you as hard as that man does.
No kidding.
And I've trained with so many pros, so many guys. I mean, a lot of guys today may look down on it and say it was overdoing it.
Yeah.
But you know what? It was. I can't put into words how incredible the feeling was. Yes, and it worked. And you had to make sure you ate for it too. But those leg days, I mean, that doesn't matter how many times you did leg days with Oscar. You had those butterflies go into the feeling because he's going to try to beat you down in some way. But what I have to say as well, as hard as his training was, and it was the most incredible training I've ever had, he did, teach people, listen to your body. How did you wake up today? How do you feel today? Do you feel like you can mentally handle the training today? Huh. So a lot of my coaching philosophies really started forming when I met Oscar because his training philosophies were basic but brutal. His nutrition were very basic. But he did teach me incredibly about the mental side of things and listening to your body and learning your body and expanding your mind a little bit. I mean, we've heard Kai go on the rants. He took it a bit overboard, but it probably is where he is today because of Oscar, And, to this day, I still – and we could talk about the New York Pro Pepper as well, where me and Oscar kind of linked back up together for training. But, yeah, if it wasn't for those sessions with Oscar and really teaching me – I mean, even before I was pushing to my limits with my dad in the gym. But when me and my dad started training with Oscar together for Team Nationals, that's when I got to see a side of bodybuilding. Like, holy!
Wait, your dad trained with you guys too?
Yeah. So we'll get into how I started coaching my dad when I was 16.
I was going to bring that up.
He lived through that. Yeah. So we'll get into that. But I was actually getting ready for Team Nationals under George Farah underneath George Farah, and to be honest, the attention just wasn't really there. And I tried talking to him about it. And then finally I told him, listen, I called him up. I said, Oscar, because my dad started training with Oscar weeks before me because he was right there. Somebody introduced them and I had the opportunity. And so 8 weeks out from Team Nationals, that's when I started with Oscar. He took over everything and that was it. And me and my dad would train with Oscar together and we were just destroying each other in that gym.
That's amazing. I just couldn't imagine, because the bond you must have with your dad, kind of like we had Carlos on recently. You could tell the bond with his dad is great, but the bond you must have with your dad, I mean, it's just something that goes unsaid when you've been in the trenches with a buddy or a training partner, years after years, grinding it out, pushing each other to these crazy limits that you just know other people couldn't push you to or couldn't handle, and you did that with your dad. Like that's really something, man. That's pretty cool to hear.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's I mean, we've always been cool. We really got extra close when he started bodybuilding after my first show, and then we started training together. I coached him for a long period. I coached him throughout all his shows that he did, and then obviously after my mom died, we started riding motorcycles. We've done everything together. We fought together. We've trained together. Like we've done everything. And if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be in any of the positions I'm in. That's for damn sure.
What was it like prepping him?
Honestly, I wish every client was like my dad. And I also, for the record, had no idea what I was doing. I was 16 years old, and my first coach was Factory, and my dad sits me. It was a week after my first show. He says, "Can you make me a diet? I just want to put on some muscle." I said, "Sure." 2 weeks later, he goes, "I want to start training." Okay. A month later, he goes, "I want to compete." This is a month into never bodybuilding in his life. So I says, "Okay." He goes, "But I'll never forget this conversation because it was at our kitchen counter and when we lived together." He goes, "I want you to do it. I want you to prep me. I want you to learn how to be a coach." Wow. He goes, "Just don't kill me." He goes, "Just don't kill me." And guys, I don't know how I didn't do that because his first prep, he was working 6 to 7 days a week doing concrete. He has his own business. He was doing 8 to 12-hour days. I had this poor man on 3 hours of cardio a day, 0 carbs for 6 weeks. I was cutting his water 3 days out, and then he didn't think it was 3 shows. His transformation was incredible. But I couldn't at the time grasp why he looked so good a week after his conversation. He looked like he could have went into a Masters qualifying show and sweeped everybody week after. But my mind just couldn't grasp the concepts of why me driving him into the ground with the diet and cardio and diuretics and stuff. But that's what started. And then I started coaching, part-time for a year. People started offering me money. It was all older guys. And then eventually I went full-time in 2018. But, backtracking, if it wasn't for him having that conversation with me, I wouldn't be coaching people.
That's amazing. Isn't it funny when we think back to some of the first moves we made with our first clients and how we look at it now and be like, oh my God, what was I thinking? That's the opposite of what I should have been doing.
And we were convinced we knew what we were doing too.
100%. You couldn't move me off my position back then off this or that. Yeah.
Right.
I was definitely over the years a very this is my way, that's it. But now I think back, even from stuff I did a year ago, 2 years ago. Yep. But I really think back to what I did with him, and I was like, Jesus, what was I thinking? The thing is, I didn't have much knowledge. I was learning on the forums and online and from Factory and guys in the gym, But he's alive and healthy to this day, thank God. And if it wasn't for him, that wouldn't have sparked everything for me.
He has an EGFR of 9, but outside of that, he's fine.
But his blood work looks like he's never taken a steroid or bodybuilding in his life.
Nice.
And even with all the toxic chemicals he's, inhaled and absorbed with all the years of doing concrete and stuff, that's definitely genetic. But
he has to be a tough guy too. He has to be a tough guy to begin with, man. I mean, if he's a blue collar worker working in concrete, I mean, his own business, and then it sounds like that's the life that you were raised in too. It sounds like that's where your work ethic comes from, is from him.
Yeah, I mean, even in those preps with all the work that he was doing, he never complained once. He never asked for food. He never deviated. He never didn't do less than the cardio I told him to do, which was incredible to me. Even on the day of the show, I remember the first day he competed, he comes rolling into the room. Me and my friend Mike were sleeping in the same room. And you would think the day of the show, with what I did to this man, he would be half dead. He rolls in with a big smile on his face with food for us. He goes, "You guys ready to go to the show?" I'm like, wow. But he had me and my family working since we were 5 or 6.
Yeah.
So, that's how he came up. So that's how he raised us,
So you're no stranger to doing hard labor then, and actually working for a living,
Yeah, I had to do it my whole life. We didn't have a choice. When they bought a home, we were the ones in our weekends and summer times that worked on it with him. If we wanted to buy something, my mom would say, "Go work with your dad."
Yeah.
You know, we had to learn how to use our hands, and if we wanted something, we had to earn it, unless it was a birthday or Christmas. And even then, you know, my whole life I was doing concrete or construction, and that was for most of my life. Yeah.
Now, obviously, genetically, we pick up, you know, both the genetic predisposition of both our parents, but usually we pick up more of one than the other. As an example, I tell my kids all the time, if you're ever going to get into bodybuilding, you better hope like hell you have your mom's genetics, because mine aren't very good. Who was more genetically superior? Where did you get your structure from, your muscle shape, that sort of thing?
So this is the crazy thing, is my dad had a big waist his entire life, even when he started bodybuilding. But his legs are massive, even before bodybuilding. Mm-hmm. He has wide shoulders, a big waist, massive legs, very dense back, very small arms, which he was blessed with. And then finally I started to grow some arms. But my mom had, even when she started training right before she got cancer, and right away she started changing. She had a very small waist. She had, you know, really good delts, good arms, good shape. So I kind of had a blend of both of them in a way. And my waist was always very small, but even my brothers too, which is, yeah, my brothers and even my sisters, all of them, they all have massive legs for what they do, considering my brother's in the Army, my sister just trains once in a while. They all have small waists, pretty wide shoulders. So it was like a blend of the both. But I would say my shape definitely came more from my mom, because my dad had a very rugged, hard, you know, dense look, and mine was always like prettier and had better shape.
Gotcha.
Where do we go from here, Andrew?
Well, I mean, you brought up your mom, and I know that you were prepping for the New York Pro during that time period that she was unwell. Did you want to talk about that at all? And maybe, you know, did that influence that prep? Did it make it harder for you?
Absolutely. No. So I like to share the story, because every time I share it on a platform, somebody reaches out with some similar story. And so she was diagnosed with leukemia October 6, 2014. That was about a month or so before nationals, or 6 weeks, whatever it was. So she was undergoing treatment, and she was up and down for a few years. And then I was set to do my first pro show May 2016. But 6 weeks out from the show, she went into a coma because they gave her too much chemotherapy, it fried her new bone marrow. And she had this buildup in her lungs of aspergillus, and she had to be rushed to the hospital. They put her under, and she was supposed to die the first night. She went into septic shock, kidneys were failing. She wound up being in a coma for 3.5 weeks, until we had to make the decision that we couldn't wake her up in the condition that she was, you know, going to die no matter what. So I remember for that prep, I was working with Chris Aceto for my diet. Oscar was training me in the gym. We started our prep 8 months before. And 6 weeks out, I was around 250. I was in very good shape. I would have been around 240 on stage, but then all this happened. So during the prep, we basically lived in the ICU. We found a closet where we stored our stuff, and I would live in this closet at times. So Oscar would bring me my meals to Manhattan, train me at Fifth Avenue Gym. I believe it was Fifth Avenue Gym in Manhattan. I think it was. So this went on for 3.5 weeks. So every once in a while, I would run home. My dad would come do his shift, because we wouldn't want to leave her alone with the doctor, so we would stay up in the room. So throughout the prep, it was actually a big learning experience, because I got to see how true stress and lack of sleep can affect the body.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
There was so many. It was like, I mean, I remember very vividly going for a walk around the hospital in the middle of the night, and my stomach was just out to here. And that's very abnormal for me, especially in a prep. But I wasn't sleeping. There was weird news every day. Either she was going to get better, either she was going to die. It was very up and down. Then she wound up passing away 2.5 weeks out, I believe. And at this point, my body was just dwindling away. I should have put it off, but I remember calling my dad and saying, I don't know if I should continue this prep. I just don't know. And he said, no, when you finish what you started, your mom would want to finish what you started. Mm-hmm. So I did. Mentally, I don't think I was there 100%, even though I was still pushing forward and doing what I had to do. I think everything kind of hit me after the show. But a week out, I was around 226 pounds. I didn't look good at all. I looked very strung out. My body was very tired looking back. And then I think I was 206 after food and water the day of the show.
How much?
The amount of 206.
Wow.
Oh, my God, bro.
Yeah. The amount of diuretics I was given and the water cut and the no sodium. I mean, I never questioned any of my coaches, none of them. I always did what I was told. I didn't, whatever. But I don't even know how I didn't go to the hospital the night before the show, because I remember having such severe stomach pain that I felt like I felt like somebody was stabbing me. Let the night pass, did the New York Pro, looked absolutely awful. But yeah, that prep, I learned an incredible amount about what to do and what not to do if it came down to these situations, and the level of stress and sleep and whatnot, just even the fundamentals of it. But yeah, after that show, everything kind of hit me because I was kind of brushing off the death and whatnot, and I fell away from bodybuilding for a few years, and then end of 2019, I said it's time to come back, and then shortly after I moved to Vegas, and that was a whole thing. But yeah, before I ramble on too long, that whole prep was just a disaster. I'm glad I finished through with it, because who knows what would have happened after or whatever, but I definitely learned a lot that prep.
So you mentioned, you got to train with one of the best, training coaches out there, and sounds like probably one of the funnest place to train in Oscar's basement. But you also got to train over the last couple of years in one of the coolest, newest gyms out in Vegas. Tell us about the Dragon's Lair, and I know you probably trained a lot with Flex and a lot of it seems like a stopping house for like every good pro who's coming through there, whether for the Olympia or a lot of guys that moved out there. How's that been? Or I know you're in Florida now, but how was that for that time period?
So it was, when I was there, Flex is a very good friend of mine, he's become family to me. He's helped me out in more ways than I can even say. But when I first moved to Vegas, it was to make my comeback into bodybuilding. This was before the Dragon's Lair was even a thought. And then he wound up moving there and bringing the gym. We became training partners. He was preparing for his comeback and going to the Open. And I was going to come back next year and do the New York Pro. But training there, it was incredible, especially training with him. He reminded me a lot about Oscar in a way, because he just goes absolutely nuts in the gym. And it was a quick reminder of how far away I was from what I used to do. But being in that gym, it was the thing I have to say too is, me personally, I like training in a gym alone with just my training partner or my coach. That's why I loved Oscar's gym. Could do whatever you want, not have to think about anybody, not have to talk to anybody. That's why we made our own gym for a short amount of time. So I'm that type of person. But being there in Vegas, and then eventually Rafa Brandao from Brazil, another good friend of ours, he was training with us for a while. So all of us training together, it gave me a good feeling of when I first got back into bodybuilding, that bond with my friends from New York that I started bodybuilding with. But that gym is absolutely incredible. I tell everybody, if you have the chance to stop by in Vegas, stop by it. However, if it's Olympia time, good luck walking around the gym, because it's an absolute madhouse. It looked like an Arnold Sports Festival in there. But between the machines and the people that train there, it's a very friendly environment. The one thing they don't tolerate is I'm going to say it straight, people being dickheads. And so that's one thing they don't tolerate there. They try to make it as friendly of an environment as possible for everybody. But it was a great time training there. I was trying to make my comeback there. That didn't pan out due to some health issues that we can go into if you want. But it was incredible. I don't regret moving to Vegas whatsoever, even though I'm not bodybuilding anymore.
I know, Skip, you had been wanting to talk about that, right? The health stuff.
Yes. I met you at Titan, face-to-face anyway, and down here in Fort Lauderdale. And, it's funny, I told the other guys, and I'm not trying to seem obsequious or anything, but it was kind of funny how you right away within 5 minutes, I'm like, this guy is quite humble. He's quite personable. He's not the typical. It wasn't what I expected. Let's put it that way. You just were. You were just kind of open, friendly, kind of, take it or leave it. Yeah, I'll shoot the shit with pretty much anybody. So you spoke about and I didn't know about it. I felt bad because I felt like I should have known about it. But you were telling me about the mercury poisoning and how you were just finishing up at that time.
Yes.
And I was kind of blown away by that story because I had heard about it, but I had always kind of blown it off as, I've eaten enough tuna in my life that if there was any mercury poisoning, I'd be green by now. That type of shit. But you legit did have to deal with that. And I think the listeners really would like to hear what it was you went through and how you came out of that.
I actually remember that conversation because, I was finishing up my treatment at that point. Going through that was probably one of the worst things I've gone through in my life. And I've gone through a lot in a short period of time. So when I moved to Vegas March 2020, shortly after, I started getting some weird stomach issues. Actually, Andrew tried helping me for a bit with my issues before I even knew what it was, a mercury poisoning, because I reached out to him. And I thought it was just stomach issue. I had no idea. Maybe it could be SIBO. Maybe it could be this. I was constipated. I had diarrhea. I was constipated, distension, stomach pain. And then it started turning into skin issues. I mean, it's hard to tell even now in this lighting, but even now it aged my face incredibly over a year. I started getting these bags under my eyes, these weird breakouts all over. It was very hard for me to put on muscle, which for me is extremely strange. That has never happened in my entire life. No matter what I took, no matter what I ate, I wasn't getting any pumps in the gym. I wasn't growing. I wasn't getting any stronger. I was exhausted all the time. Then it started turning into mental issues, severe depression. I had suicidal thoughts. My focus was all over the place, memory issues. My speech was becoming affected. And then Flex moved to Vegas. I told him about my stomach issues. He recommended I work with, his name was Roland Pankowitz. He's up in Canada. He ran some Genova testing, and my mercury was off the charts. It was literally off the chart. And nobody thought to test it, not even myself. But for years, I was a big sushi eater. I would eat anywhere between 2 to 3 times a week, 40, 50 pieces at a clip when I was bodybuilding. When I moved to Vegas, I was eating tuna throughout the day, the flavored tuna packets.
Yeah.
And I was eating a lot of it. And so we ran the tests, and then I actually got in touch with Jason Huh, because I know he had mercury poisoning, and that retired him, which I was afraid was going to happen to me. And he gave me a whole rundown over the phone on what kind of doctor to look for, what kind of testing to do. And I basically took what he told me to do, told his doctor, and they did it. So all throughout 2021, I went weekly for intravenous DMPS. I took EDTA pill form. They had me doing acupuncture, oxygen therapy for my blood, and I did this from June 2021 to December 2021. And the levels went down to nothing. So throughout that time period, I was like very up and down. I didn't feel right, but I was getting better as time progressed. But before that was absolutely horrific. Like just going day to day and just even thinking about body. I was trying my best to come back, but just going through that was absolutely horrible.
That had to be like terrifying too, especially before you even knew what it was, man. Like, am I going crazy? You know what I mean? Between the mental stuff, the physical stuff, I could only imagine.
Well, let me go one deeper, because I'm wondering too, the time frame that you're having these issues versus your mom's passing. Did you have these issues after?
No, I had zero issues after. So she passed away in May 2016. I stopped bodybuilding, stopped really training for a while. I was like very on and off. It was August 6, 2019. I said, okay, I got to come back into bodybuilding. Yeah. And then March 2020 is when I moved to Vegas. And the gut issue started right before I moved to Vegas. But then when I got there and I tracked back, I was eating enormous amounts of fish, just almost 14 ounces of meal, tuna on top of the sushi. And then things got worse and got worse and got worse and got worse.
And the last thing you're thinking is it's the fish. You know, that's like the last thing you're thinking, you know, at that time at least.
Exactly, and that's what I'm thinking. And I'm wondering this, and maybe I'm thinking differently than everybody else, but did you maybe think, is this what my mom had? Or do I have leukemia? Is there something hereditary? Yeah. It had to, right?
Because so another thing too is I still get scared to this. I still have immune problems from the mercury. Oh. But yeah, at times that was like, you know, I was like, God forbid, could this be a cancer? Could this be something? Because, you know, for me, you know, and I'm going to be honest, I tried taking more steroids. Sure. I tried taking less. I tried eating more. I tried eating less. Nothing was doing anything. Like weight was just falling off me like I've never seen before. My moods were up and down. I felt weak. I'm like, and I knew my gear and stuff was good. You know, that wasn't even a question. I looked up and down at everything I possibly could. But it was like, some people even said, "I think you're thinking too much. You're going crazy." I was like, "No, I'm not. I know my body. Yeah. Something is fucking wrong here." And then when the testing came out, the mercury was off the charts. But that absolutely went through my mind.
And that doesn't just, from what I understand about like heavy metal toxicity, like it doesn't just leave your body on its own like that. You could eat less tuna and it doesn't matter, right? Like, because that's just going to stay until you actually do something about it.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the metal, but mercury, absolutely. Lead stores in the bones. Mercury, for the most part, stores in tissues and connective tissues in the brain. So chelation therapy is a must. That's what I went through, is chelation therapy. It basically goes in, it pulls it out of the tissue so you can excrete it out. So here in the United States, they don't really recognize it, so you got to pay out of pocket. You got to go to a functional doctor. But yet, if you go to Europe, it's something that their medical system takes very seriously. But yet here in the United States, so many kids are exposed to lead in paints, even in material, clothing, mercury in food. I mean, it's all over the place. And this country, they don't take it serious. The doctors know nothing about it unless it's a functional doctor. So you have to go through this treatment to pull this out of your bones because it will cause immune problems over time, there was even a story of a child online who couldn't find the help he needed. He was a teenager, I believe, and eventually he wound up committing suicide. His parents documented his journal online to raise awareness to mercury poisoning.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then, can I interject? Yeah. I want to share, because me and Dom worked together for a little while, because I assumed, from all the symptoms, I thought it was like SIBO, like he had a small intestinal bacterial infection or something related to that. So we did a detox, and I put him on an elemental plan. And just to give you an idea of like what Dom was doing, he was literally 4 to 5 meals a day of just True Nutrition whey and either 3 to 4 scoops of maltodextrin per meal and 1 scoop of MCT powder every meal. So anywhere between like 90 and 120 grams of malto, which, as you guys know, doesn't, you can do that once or twice in a day, but 4 to 5 times a day is, this is the length that he was willing to go to try to like get this thing figured out.
Yeah.
For that time period. And I
threw
him on the elemental.
For the time that we did that, I felt great.
Well, because you weren't getting any fish. You weren't getting any mercury for that time period. So at least it wasn't getting worse. You weren't having the chelation therapy or anything else that was helping decrease it, but at least you weren't adding to it during that time period. And with what we did initially with some of the supplements, we did detox your liver, which probably played a small role in helping, get rid of some of that extra mercury. But yeah, like I'll be honest, I didn't think like, oh, he's got a heavy metal toxicity issue. He's got mercury. That was the furthest thing from my mind. It was really, I was thinking, okay, he's got a bacterial overgrowth that was caused, because your symptoms were almost like textbook,
So
no, it's true. Everybody thought the same thing. Nobody would have, even doctors. I even went to a gastro, which we know how worthless they can be sometimes. Nobody knew what it was, but for that period of time, it felt pretty good. What'd you say, Scott? I apologize.
Oh, no. So, you find out that it's mercury, you start the therapies. Can you refresh me? How long did that process take? And how long did it take before you started feeling better? Like after your first chelation therapy, where you're like, oh, wow, I can tell the difference. Or was it something that took a while?
So that's actually a great question, because that's something Jason had warned me on. So my treatment went from June 2021 to December 2021.
Okay.
And what he told me is
Yeah,
it was all year, and I went pretty much every week. I skipped maybe 2 or 3 weeks because I was traveling.
Yeah.
But what he told me, he goes, when you get your treatment, you're going to feel this high raise of energy after. You're going to feel like a little bit jittery, energetic, maybe a little bit happy, but it's going to go away. So when you take that therapy, it's pulling it out of the tissues, bringing it out, but you're becoming more exposed to it in a way.
Oh.
So you're going through these ups and downs. Yeah, you're excreting it, but you're not excreting all of it. So whatever doesn't get urinated out or doesn't come out in your bowels gets redistributed. So it can go to any of the organs or the brains. So there was times I felt damn good. My skin would glow. I looked great. And then there was other times where I couldn't really function until like the next treatment. It would just be this consistent up and down. But throughout the year, it got better and better and better. And then once the levels were down, they said, you don't need it anymore. And I stopped. But it's interesting because I would still like to get tested to this day to see if any more has maybe come out, because I still deal with some of the symptoms, mentally, and my skin and stuff and my immune system. I know it's going to take a while, but throughout the treatment was very up and down. But for a while after, I felt great. Amazing. Wow.
So you were bodybuilding up into that point. You were going to make a comeback. Obviously, this completely sidelined not only that, but like really life in general. what happened after that? Because we know that you had stopped then, right?
So from June 2020 to December 2020, there was no bodybuilding. I didn't even take TRT most of the time. If I remember the shot, it was horrible. If I remember to take a shot, I did. I was primarily focused on just getting healthy and just getting this out of my body. Once I got told it was good to go, beginning of January last year, 2022, I said, okay, now it's time to come back. And that's when me and Flex really started picking things up again. And then things started working again. I went up to 290. It wasn't the best looking 290, but I was getting strong in the gym. But
it looked like someone put an air hose in you, because I saw you the second time. I told them, I'm like, I don't know what it must feel like to look like that one day, and then 6 months later, it looked like you put an air hose in every one of your muscles. I was blown away. I'm like, well, he certainly is feeling healthier. Holy crap!
I was too when we saw each other. Both our ladies were doing the class show, Dom, and I did a double take when I saw you there. I'm like, Jesus, because I had only seen a picture of you online or video maybe months prior, and then to see you in person, I was like, Jesus, this guy's been training and eating again. This is crazy.
Yeah, so that it was. Normally I put on muscle very quick, but I do get very watery and inflamed. It just always was that way. So a matter of 3 weeks, I blew up, and then it just got more and more and more. However, looking back on what I was doing, I really should have slowed things down a bit, and I could have. But it was like, let's keep training, let's keep eating more, let's keep taking this stuff. But then horrible sleep apnea came, and I had to do sleep apnea testing. So from January to late May last year, that was it. I knew I was coming back. I was going to keep going. I was going to do the New York Pro this year. But I made a decision So Flex retired. I remember I got the call from Flex before I saw him in person. He said, listen, dude, I can't. I want to focus on my family. I'm worried about my health, this and that, because he's spoken openly about his stomach issues and having to eat. And, kind of played in my mind that he just seemed so relieved. And throughout all last year, something didn't feel right. I didn't feel healthy. And then it was like, I spent all this money and all this time on getting this mercury out of my body. I'm finally healthy. Was it a sign to stop bodybuilding? That's what I was thinking to myself. So late last May, I said, you know what? This has been great. I put all this size on. January 22nd, I took my last progress. June 22nd or June 23rd, I posted my last progress photo when all the water came off. I looked insane, but that's when I was like, that's it for bodybuilding for me. Let me focus on my clients. They deserve all my time and attention, and focus on life. So there's no more competitive bodybuilding for me.
Right on.
And right now you're really into boxing, kickboxing, martial arts. Tell us a little bit about that, because I see some of your videos and I see.
Okay, hold on.
Some of the
Before we do that, I don't want this to get lost. Any gear you have left over, I'll text you. I kid. Kind of.
Listen, I hate to break your heart. As soon as I made that decision, I gave everything away. I'm done with all this stuff. I keep a couple bottles of test on hand, and that's it. As soon as that was done, I'm like, I am not going back from this. I don't need any of this stuff. I'm starting fresh, because I have an extremist mindset. It's either all or nothing, And then once I made that decision, I'm like, I am done with this. So people still ask me to this day, you still got anything? I'm like, no, it's all gone.
No, real answer. Did you keep the GH though?
Exactly.
So that I did. That I did. You're dead on with that. That I wasn't giving that away. But
it's just too expensive to give away to somebody, right? You're like, I got $600-700 in my hand in one kit right here. Yeah, I'm not just giving this to anybody.
Yeah,
right.
Always can
so
stay younger.
That I did use. So I came off everything cold turkey for 4 months. When I started my martial arts training, which we'll get into, I just stopped everything. I was like, let me just stop. Kept a little GH in, and then now I run 100 mgs a test every 7 to 8 days. And then I used up all the GH, and I refused to buy more. So, but yeah, so now once I made that decision, it was actually another thing because of Flex. 2021, he brought me to my first UFC fight in Vegas. And I was never a fan of anything but bodybuilding. So I was like, he's like the ultimate fan there is. He's good friends with a lot of the top guys. All the guys at the UFC know him. And I remember watching his fight, and it was during the time of my Mercury treatment. And I'm like, damn, this is awesome. I love this stuff. I would love to do this one day. So I said, one day when I'm done bodybuilding, I'm going to do this. But little did I know that time came way shorter than I planned on it to. So making the decision to leave my competitive goals behind me, focus on my health, focus on my clients, and focus on life, and now being close to my family now, I was like, I need a goal and something to put this energy into. And I didn't even know if I was going to like it because I had no martial arts background whatsoever. So I started training at Extreme Couture in Vegas, which is one of the most it's one of the best gyms in the world when it comes to martial arts. I started with jiu-jitsu, and then I added in Muay Thai, and then now we have wrestling. So I train jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, and wrestling. And it's one of the best decisions I ever made in my life. So some days we train 3.5 hours. Some days we train 2 hours. We try to train every day if we could. But it's completely given me a new sense of direction. Like I've become obsessed with it like I did with bodybuilding when I was a teenager.
I just want to point out that you said you switched to martial arts for your health.
Yeah. So a lot of people say the same. Some people have said the same thing, and they were like, "Wait, don't you know about brain damage? Don't you know you can break or tear things?" I'm like, "Yeah, I know," but it's like, with bodybuilding and having having the prior experience of mercury poisoning, I know it has a massive effect on the heart and brain.
Yeah.
So we know with steroids and weight gain, this just isn't the most ideal. And I'm not going to lie to you guys, I was a bit scared. Sure. When I was trying to come back after my treatment, because it was just sticking in my head about what Jason Ho was telling me, because he retired because of his mercury poisoning. Mm-hmm. And that's how he started his supplement business and focused on his family. So it was in my head, but it was like, do I not do anything or do I do something? So I was like, let me do this, and I went all in on the MMA now. And
you got to have something. For people like us, you got to have something in your life that you love, that you focus on. So I think we all totally get it,
And that's it. In terms of health, yeah, you can risk brain damage and serious injury and stuff like that, if you're not careful enough. But the one thing about me is I was always scared about my heart. It's just been always in my head for years, and it forces you to become cardiovascularly fit. Like, you have no choice, or you're going to feel like you're drowning. And for most of the time last year, I felt like I was drowning. And now I'm at a point where I can do 3.5 hours in a day, 4 hours in a day, whatever it is, and I can go. I still get gassed out because I'm still heavy. I'm trying to get my weight down still. But my heart feels as healthy and strong as it's ever been my entire life. Sure. So that's been the cool thing about it is I definitely feel like I'm alive again,
Well, and you only really get hurt in MMA if you get hit. So
you just don't get hit.
Get hit. I mean, be better at it. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the thing.
It doesn't seem that hard.
That's the problem too. Is I like getting hit because it gives me like a sense of like, okay, now I got to adapt to the situation. I got to come back with something.
Yeah.
So I'm still learning about taking the extremes down to a different level, But it's been incredible.
I've been wondering something like since the start here. So because you've been around you've been around since you were a kid, and you've seen basically bodybuilding evolve. Like the days when you started compared to today, we were all there too. It's very different, and I think you have an interesting perspective because you were so young when you started, and when you see the newer generation of bodybuilding and see how much it's evolved, I would love to hear what your thoughts are about not like necessarily just the pro level of bodybuilding, but bodybuilding as like a culture today compared to when you started. Because when you started, it wasn't as like mainstream as it is today, and we didn't have like Instagram like we do now. It was a different place. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I mean, to some, I may come off like what's the word? I may come off like I don't know, maybe a bit sour, but I have to be honest. I'm very upset with the state of bodybuilding today and how people conduct themselves and on a general basis. So back then, back in New York, I was fortunate to have Factory as my first coach. My gym was full of bodybuilders, but it was very welcoming. It was, like you said, it wasn't mainstream bodybuilding, but the bodybuilders that are in there helped each other. We brought each other up. It was a very conducive and supportive environment. Going to shows was always entertaining. I mean, you could go to an amateur show back then, and I would remember walking out so motivated. For years, these shows, you have guys just that you would see in the national levels competing at these regional shows and trying to get requalified. Yeah. And the national level shows. And even the way the media was back then. You remember Flex Magazine online and Muscular Development and the forums. There was no social media. Like, it was great, the buildup of not only the pros, but even the amateurs and seeing guys come up. And today, there's no coverage of anything. Almost nothing except for the pros. And even the way they do the pros isn't even, because you have social media. But from the way people back then, I guess you could call it old school. I wish I was sometimes born in the 90s era of bodybuilding so I can see how well those guys were. Like, I caught the tail end of everything, I feel, in a way. I was a day late and $1 short. But I just feel not everybody, for the most part, people trained harder back then. They dieted harder. They did their cardio. Everything wasn't so overcomplicated. And for the most part, most people didn't. There wasn't really any social media to do it for. There was MySpace and then Facebook and then eventually Instagram, and then that changed into what it does today. People trained and dieted and competed to win because they loved it. Yeah, that was the thing too. Everybody loved it, but today people do it to feel like they fit in somewhere, that's okay too if you really need that. But to put your body through such stress and spend all this money, you have to love it. You have to have passion in it. If you're going to put your body through all this stress and risk health issues and whatnot, and you want to win, you have to love and have passion for it. And today, it's like they kind of just do it for social media and Instagram, or to say they're bodybuilding. It sucks to see because it's like it's
I always just not what it. I always ask this, like, I don't ask this people, but in my mind, I kind of ask this when I see certain people or I see Instagram. I'm like, if Instagram were gone today, would you still bodybuild? That's right. And there's a lot of yeses and a lot more nos, in my opinion, when I see people online or even in the gyms.
I agree, and I do think over the years, I was kind of losing that fire a little bit because of Institute. I hate social media. I hate it. If I didn't have my coaching business and I wasn't involved in bodybuilding, I wouldn't have social media. I really wouldn't. I would like to live my own private life, and it's a whole thing for me to post on Instagram. But over the last few years, especially coming back and just seeing the way people's mindsets have changed when they took a step back from the industry and how people were conducting themselves and treating one another and the drama. There was always drama in the industry, but it was always, in circles. And now it's just all out there. It's become like it's kind of become almost a circus in some ways. And I don't know. I just wish that the kids coming up today got to see bodybuilding through my eyes when I was coming up, and got to see that part of the training, got to see all the pros in New York, got to see all the old school guys at the tail end, because that's what gave me that drive. Holy fuck, those were the guys that gave me that passion, aside from me loving what I was doing. And today, there aren't really a lot of good examples for people to follow, unfortunately, either within the pros.
Well, the reality is, though, I will say this, that by having conversations like this, you are giving people an opportunity to understand that, and you can see it just in the way that you carry yourself. Having not known you personally, and this is being our first conversation, I could see that in you, and that's why I asked you that question.
Oh, thank you, Scott. Thank you.
It's cool, man. I
appreciate that.
I appreciate it. And the other thing I'm thinking is, you've had a lot of great opportunities through the year, getting to, work with Oscar as a kid, and you've met a lot of cool people. You mentioned you're friends with Flex. Everybody, and there's a reason for that, and that's because of the kind of person that you are. I can tell, man, you're the kind of person that people want to be friends with, and I think that goes a long way in life. You know what I'm saying? And I think that if people, maybe the newer generation, were to have some appreciation for that we can maybe swing it back around. So I hope so. I hope that anybody who's younger and newer can listen to this conversation and maybe take something from it and then put and look at what they're putting out into the world, I guess. And I don't mean that as a lecture. There were bad things back then as well, but I think there were some really cool things that would be cool to see come back around, come full circle.
You mean doing a workout and not taking a picture and posting about it? It's like, okay, it's Thursday. It's like, great, you know. Like,
I would even say as simple as something like people working in on. When was maybe you guys have had a different experience, but it's literally like people don't want, that's their piece of equipment, and the thought of you working in is so 1985 to them.
Really?
That I need to go back to my it's and COVID may have made it worse. Don't get me wrong, because God forbid you're going to get your cooties on it. I understand that, but even before. It was the same thing. It's literally like their room, and until they're done with it, you're not going to. It's just bizarre. How many more sets? Hey, are you just getting started? A bunch. And I just had to laugh. I'm like, God damn! And you just look at you like you're treating me like a piece of shit. I didn't treat you like a piece of shit for being a nobody in the gym, but you don't want me to work in. There's so many of those little things that are so subtle that, you know, when I hear Dom talk about how it was. When you started, that's how it was. It was like that in the 80s. When I started, it was like that in the 90s, and it was like that into the 2000s. And social media, I don't know. We became a bunch of narcissists. Now it's everybody looking askance at everybody like, oh, he's not that big, or he's not that, oh, he's not. It's just so different. It was always so supportive. And you like took me back with that statement to like 25 years ago, just like that. And it's very, will it come back around? I don't know. Scott, you're more optimistic than me. You think that people will listen and they'll be like, oh, maybe we should. I think they're listening and they're going, these four old heads don't know what they're talking about. They need to get with the times. Like, oh, they're talking about what happened back in the 90s. Ugh. Yeah, that's me. That's the pessimist in me. That's the cynic in me. Get off my lawn.
Skip, did you have some rapid fire questions lined up?
I do. I have some. I've started doing this with the people who come on, and I don't like to give them a heads up because I want to ask you some questions. It's basically the first thing that comes off your head, or it comes out of your brain, comes off the top of your head. Some of them are serious. Some of them are not so serious. If you want to pass on one, or if you want to pass, that's fine. But sometimes I have questions that when you pass, they're even worse. So I'm just giving you a heads up. Okay. I'll break in, though, with the easier ones, okay? Money is no object. What vehicle is in your driveway?
A Ferrari.
Nice. Anything specific or no? Ferrari's cool, but does one stand out? I don't know if you're...
I'm a very simple person. I'm not even much of a car guy, but since I was a kid, I said one day I would love to have my phone was on low power.
Nice.
I would love to have a Ferrari, so yeah. If life ever gives me that opportunity, sure.
Same thing, money is no object. Dream vacation.
To travel the entire world and try food in all different cultures. All over the place.
Just not fish. Not fish.
Not all the fish. Maybe I'll eat some fish. Yeah. But I would love to travel the entire world because I love to eat and just try. That was always my thing with vacations. Just try foods from every place I go. I would just love to travel the world.
Nice.
Best school lunch, the cafeteria pizza or the cafeteria lasagna?
It was pizza.
Orange grease on top.
It was definitely pizza, the $6 slices that they gave us.
Difference between, and this is going to give away whether you have clients in the UK, difference between daft and deft.
I don't even know what either of those are.
Fair enough. Like I said, that's a UK thing. I wouldn't have picked it up without UK clients. So for what
I've got UK clients. I don't, and I do a podcast with UK guy every week.
You've never heard him say deft? Okay, then you need to know. Deft is skilled, like you're very skilled with your movements. Daft is you're silly or foolish. You'll hear daft. I've heard that one a lot. What's your carry gun?
It's a Glock 40C.
Good man. Good man.
It's a 40 cal. It's not really a carry gun, but that's what I keep on me.
Wait, what is it? A 20? Is it a 23? Glock 23? Because it's a C, so it's compensated.
It's a 40 caliber. I know that. I don't know the exact technicalities of it, but that's what I keep on me usually.
Does it have like the hole? It has like the holes in the top if it's a C.
Oh yes, it does.
Yeah, I've got one of those too. Don't show it, Andrew. Don't show it. You'll get us demonetized. We can't.
Let me break it down.
If we were going to, I could.
Will it take a soul? If you need it to, will it take someone's soul?
In a heartbeat. In a heartbeat.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's put a hole in them.
That was my first gun. By the way.
Next question. Hottest teacher in high school, male or female?
Wait, what? Wait,
Do you remember? I don't remember teachers'
Who
names.
was your hottest teacher in high school? It could be male or female. I got to be politically correct here. I don't know. Maybe
I don't
you're
remember
gay.
my
Maybe
high
you're
school teachers'
bisexual.
names.
I don't know.
Andrew, do you remember your
I
high
don't
school
know.
teachers' names?
Not the name, but I remember what she looked like. She wasn't my teacher. She was a teacher in my class. She taught Spanish.
I know, but we were teenagers, so even if they weren't like smoking hot, there had to be like, there was for me. There was at least one that you think like, okay.
I don't even remember the name, but I remember there being one in high school. She was a
There
math
you go.
teacher. Yeah, that everybody in the school loved.
Okay, next question. Did you bang her? No. Okay, next question.
No,
If you did bang her, would you lie about it on a podcast? Next question.
No.
Okay.
No.
You ride. Have you been to Sturgis?
I have. Oh, wait, my dogs are fighting. Guys, hey, hey, Mickey. Sorry, guys. So no, I have not been to Sturgis, unfortunately. So I actually, when I was trying to come back into bodybuilding, I stopped riding because I was afraid of getting hurt and putting on the sidelines yet again.
Sure.
Now that I'm down here in Florida, I still have my bike. I brought it to Vegas. I brought it here. Hopefully, I can take a Sturgis trip one day.
Fair enough. What's your dream bike? Well, what do you ride first? You have it?
It's a 2016 Street Bob with the Dyna body on it. So
I figured it
we
was.
did the heads, we did the cams on it. I still have it. People are like, oh, do you want a bagger? Do you want this? No, I love my bike. 16-inch 8 hangers on it. That's what I started with. I have a ton of memories on that bike. I got it after my mom died, and I will drag that thing out as long as I possibly can. I don't want any other bike. Even if somebody said I will buy you the bike, whatever bike you would want, I'm happy with mine.
You're not a geezer glide kind of guy, I don't think. All right.
No,
you have
not
to
yet,
pick,
at least.
Eventually. We'll get there eventually. One of two. You have to pick one. Who do you want to see naked? Melania Trump or Michelle Obama?
That's obvious.
Melania Trump.
Yeah.
Michelle Obama's pretty thick. She's pretty good looking too, though. Come on now. Anyway,
I like my chicks
okay,
look like
now
chicks.
you still have to pick two: Dianne Feinstein or Nancy Pelosi.
Oh.
I know it's a tough one. I'm ending it with that one because it's the hardest one. But you got to pick one.
Who's Dianne Feinstein?
She's
Oh,
a
no
representative
kidding.
from California.
What?
Yeah. And thankfully,
She's
she's
the
retiring.
She's the oldest member of Congress right now.
Wow.
So she's like 86 or 85.
I guess I'll go with her because Nancy.
And you
Pelosi
haven't seen her, but I got to tell you, it's a tough decision either way.
It's
Either
one
one
and
is going to be.
the same, honestly.
Yeah, either way, it's going to be painful.
I'm gonna pass on that one.
And I don't have a follow up because that
one.
one was so good. I don't have a follow up.
Good move. All right. That's been our new experiment. Skip's been coming up with the rapid fire questions, but that's all we've got time for. Man, this has been a serious pleasure. It's been great to meet you. I really appreciate you taking all the time to come on. You know, I do have one more question. You've got 3 dogs. What kind of dogs are they?
So, Mickey and Misty I had since 2015. They were rescues. They came from South Texas. They're like a healer dog mix. They kind of look like mini German Shepherds in a way. They're 30 pounds each.
Okay.
And then my girlfriend's dog, Clyde, now that me and her live together, so that's who was fighting, was Mickey and Clyde, because they're 2 males. They kind of go at it sometimes. And he's a Frenchie. So
nice.
it's a weird mix.
Yeah. All right. That's all we got time for. If people did want to reach out to you, Dom, for coaching, or just to follow you, with Instagram that we just were talking about, what's the best ways to reach out to you and where can they follow you?
So my Instagram is IFBB Dom Cardone. That's IFBB DOMCARDONE, or my website, CardoneNutrition.com.
Awesome. I'll make sure to have that down in the show notes. And guys, if you want to reach out to Skip, you can go to teamskip.com, hit up Andrew at bodyberry.com. You can reach out to me, mcnallydiets@gmail.com. Thank you guys for hanging with us and watching this. Check out our great sponsors, TrueNutrition.com. Use our code THINK. SupplementSource.ca for our Canadians. STROM Sports Nutrition for those of you in the UK. And thank you to everybody from Patreon. We'll be back with a bunch more stuff. And Dom, man, this has been an absolute pleasure. I'm really glad that we got a chance to finally do this.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys very much for having me on. It was a great show. And like I said, I've been watching you guys for a while. And it was a great conversation to have. So thank you for having me on.
Hell yeah. Guys, we will see you soon.